It all began when my cousin Tom organized a bachelor party for his brother, my cousin James. I was invited, and naturally, I said I'd be there. Doris, my wife, wasn't pleased at all. She had a very low opinion of bachelor parties, thanks to some troubling experiences in her family. Her brother Sam had gone to one, where he ended up with an STD after paying a stripper for a private show. Her cousin Ron had left his wife and kids to run off with a stripper from a bachelor party. And her father had gotten so drunk at a bachelor party that he crashed his car and spent a week in the hospital. Doris had every reason to be concerned. I reminded her that she'd attended a few bachelorette parties with male strippers, and she argued that it was different. In what way? I asked. A male stripper can't do what a female stripper does at a bachelor party. A female stripper can get intimate with every man there, so guys are more likely to take advantage. Male strippers can only perform once or twice, so the girls tend to behave themselves. Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? It's a well-known fact that women can control themselves better than men. Seriously? Do you have any idea how absurd that statement is? I don't want to argue about this, Frank. I don't want you going to Jim's bachelor party. Take him out for dinner or something, but don't go to the party. What you're saying, Doris, is that you don't trust me. After 2 years of dating, 2 years of living together, and 8 years of marriage, you still don't know me better than that? Well, I'm going to the party, and that's final. Of course, it wasn't really final. With 9 days left before the party, Doris did everything she could to change my mind. The atmosphere at home grew frosty as she practically ignored me. Her main tactic was withholding affection. We usually made love 3 or 4 times a week, but for those 9 days, all I heard was, "Not tonight, Frank. I'm not feeling well." And the ever-popular excuse, "Not tonight. I've got a headache." It was clear that if I went to the party, the dry spell could extend well beyond it. But I could be just as stubborn as Doris, and I was determined to go. While I could have forced the issue, the fallout wasn't worth considering. I managed to push back in a small way. Every Friday night, without exception, I took Doris out to dinner. So when I came home from work on Friday and found her dressed and ready to go, I went to the home office I'd set up and sat at my desk, turning on the computer. When I didn't come downstairs dressed for dinner, Doris came looking for me. She entered the room and asked, "What are you doing? Why aren't you getting ready for dinner?" "I'm just browsing the internet for some interesting content." "Interesting content? What do you mean?" "I'm looking for some videos. Since you've been avoiding me, I'm feeling pretty worked up and need something to help me relieve some tension. You're welcome to join if you want." The sound of the door slamming behind her made it clear she wasn't interested in being a spectator. On Saturday, I left the house before Doris woke up. I had a regular golf game with 3 friends every Saturday morning, and our tea time was 10 after 6. Doris usually slept in until around 8. She had a standing appointment at the beauty parlor at 11, so she would typically be coming home just as I returned from my round at Red Ridge. This time, though, Doris was going to miss her appointment because I took her car instead of my truck. Her car had an automatic transmission, while my truck was a stick shift, and Doris couldn't drive a manual. It might seem like a small move, but when you're playing the game, you take whatever advantage you can. When I got home, Doris was understandably furious. I chose to ignore her and focused on getting ready for Jim's bachelor party. As I walked out of the house, I heard her last protest. "Damn it, Frank, I told you I don't want you going to that party." I ignored her, got into my truck, and headed to the party. It was your typical bachelor party. 17 guys, most of whom I knew and liked. I say most because Mel Timmons was there, and I had never liked him. He'd always had a thing for Doris and had tried more than once to come between us before we got married. We had 3 tables set up for poker, nickel, dime, quarter, dealer's choice, with a 3-raise limit, so no one was risking much. 2 hours into the game, which was being held at Jim's apartment, the doorbell rang. Tom answered it to find 2 female cops standing there. One of them said, "Your neighbors are complaining about the noise. Whose place is this?" Tom pointed to Jim, and the two officers walked over to him. Before anyone could react, one of the cops slapped handcuffs on Jim and said, "You are under arrest." The cuffs were real, not props. One of the cops began reading Jim his rights. "You have the right to remain silent," and all that. Until then, everyone had assumed the women were strippers. Tom's look of surprise and a closer examination of their uniforms suggested they were the real deal. People started to get nervous about what was happening until the cop reading Jim his rights said, "You have the right to make love with me." And as she spoke, she pulled out a mini cassette recorder. Stripper music started to play as the other officer began to peel off her uniform. From that moment on, it was the kind of wild bachelor party Doris had probably imagined. I won't deny that I was tempted, but I stayed put, simply watching the action and stewing with the knowledge that my only release would be my right hand when I got home. As I observed Tom, Jim, and Mark with one of the women named Missy, Mel approached me and asked, "Aren't you going to play?" "Nope, no way. If I did and Doris found out, she'd kick me out for sure. You know, the whole marriage vow thing and all that." "Tough luck, man. These are two top-notch ladies who really know what they're doing. I've never had better." As I watched, I found myself wondering why I didn't just say, "To hell with Doris," and join in. I was a man with needs, and Doris wasn't fulfilling them. Here I was in an apartment with two women who would. It wouldn't be about love or emotional connection, just sex for the sake of sex. So why not? I caught myself a few times reaching for my zipper or belt buckle, but I stopped myself just in time. Shortly before the party began to wind down, both women approached me. Missy asked, "What's the matter, honey? Don't either of us appeal to you?" Quite the opposite. I'm tempted to take on both of you, but unfortunately, I have a character flaw. "A character flaw?" Donna inquired. "What kind of flaw?" "There's this silly little thing in my head that tells me I need to stay faithful to my wife." "Really?" Donna said, sounding impressed. "I didn't think there were any good guys left. I'm going to give you my number in case your wife ever lets you slip away." "Same here, sweetie," Missy added. "I'd love to meet a guy who thinks like that." Tom and Jim came over, took the ladies by the arm, and led them away. As I watched them go, I couldn't help but be a bit amazed. When the party started winding down, it was just Tom, Jim, the two girls, and me left. I was reasonably sober, so I stayed to help with the cleanup. Donna and Missy came up to me, and Donna said, "You at least have to give us a kiss, sugar," while Missy giggled and added, "No charge, of course." They both kissed me and slipped me a piece of paper with their phone numbers. Donna said, "I meant what I said, sugar. If your wife is ever foolish enough to let you go, give me a call." After the two women left, Tom, who had been collecting the money, said, "I should have been born a sexy babe." Those two spent 4 hours here having a great time and walked away with $2,300 to split between them, not including the $400 they got just for the striptease. That's almost $340 an hour. We cleaned up the place, and I was about to head home when I found the two women standing by a Ford Focus with the hood up. I walked over and asked, "Got a problem?" "It won't start," Missy replied. I went to my truck, grabbed the flashlight from the glove box, and took a look. "You're out of luck tonight," I said. "The positive battery cable terminal is corroded and split in half. There aren't any auto parts stores open right now, so the car's dead until tomorrow." "Damn it," Missy exclaimed. "What now?" "We'll call a cab," Donna suggested. "At this time of night?" I replied. "You'd be waiting for hours." "No, you won't," I said. "I'll take you where you need to go. I don't work tomorrow, so I'll swing by a parts store, get what's needed, and come back to fix it." "Oh God, you're a lifesaver," Donna said gratefully. We got into my truck, and I drove them home. It turned out that the car was Donna's, but since they were roommates, I only had one place to drive to. When we arrived, I arranged to pick Donna up the next morning at 10. When I got home, I found the bedroom door locked. I remembered a scene from a John Wayne movie where his wife locked him out, and he kicked the door down, declaring, "There will be no locked doors in this house." I briefly considered doing the same, but reason prevailed. If I kicked the door in, I'd be the one to repair or replace it. Besides, unless I was planning on committing spousal rape, there wasn't anything on the other side of the door that couldn't wait. The living room couch was just as comfortable. Despite the comfort of the couch, I was in a foul mood when I got up that morning. Doris was still in bed, so I made myself some breakfast and sat down at the table to eat. Doris came into the room, looked around, and asked, "Where's mine?" "You haven't made it yet," I replied, getting up to put my dirty dishes in the dishwasher. I headed for the garage. "Where are you going, Frank?" "To pick up Donna and then head over to Jim's place to fix her car." "Who's Donna?" "One of the strippers from last night." "You're going to pick up a stripper? I suppose you had a good time with her last night, huh? Going back for more?" She sneered. "What do you care? You're not interested in giving me any, so why should it matter to you?" Then, letting my male impulsiveness take over, I added, "And it makes me wonder, Doris. You enjoy sex as much as I do, so you must be feeling just as frustrated as I am. Or maybe you're not suffering at all. Maybe you've got a boyfriend on the side keeping you satisfied while you're leaving me high and dry. Is that it, Doris? Are you cheating on me?" The shock on her face was gratifying. "I've got to go. Donna's expecting me at 10. I headed for the door. "Frank, come back here. We need to talk. We need to resolve this right now. The only thing we need, Doris, is for you to apologize for being so difficult these past 2 weeks." I walked out to the garage, grabbed my cable-cutting tool and cable crimper from my toolbox, and then went to pick up Donna. We stopped at a parts store for the terminal end we needed, and then drove over to Jim's place to fix her car. On the way, Donna asked why I looked so sour, and I was in the mood to share the whole story. "So she's upset because she doesn't like bachelor parties and thinks you might have strayed last night?" "Pretty much. You want me to call her and explain what really happened?" "Absolutely not. That would only make things worse. She'd think I had you lie for me. As it is, she already suspects I'm with you for more sex. All I can say is, if things go south between you two, give me a call." She looked at me for a moment, then added, "But you won't, will you?" "I'm just a whore. And who would want anything to do with a whore, right?" "Don't be ridiculous, Donna. You're a lovely woman and you're very likable. I'm sure we could be great friends, but as long as I'm married, that's all it can be. Even if my marriage hits a rough patch, I won't break my wedding vows while I'm still legally married. If a divorce does happen and you're still around, you'll be one of the first people I call." She gave me a long, thoughtful look and said, "I believe you mean that." "I do, sweetheart. I really do." She leaned over and kissed me. "I haven't met many genuinely nice guys in my life, but you're at the top of the list of the few I know." When we got to Jim's place, I fixed Donna's car and waited until she started it and drove off before heading home. Doris wasn't there when I arrived, so I used the time to change the oil in my truck. Still no sign of her, so I helped myself to some leftovers, ate, and then relaxed in front of the TV. Doris came home around 7, walked through the house in silence, and headed straight to the kitchen. I could hear her rummaging around as she made herself something to eat. About 20 minutes later, she entered the living room, hands on her hips, and asked, "Want to know where I've been?" I glanced over and said, "No." "Maybe I was out looking for a stud since you've been with a stripper." Given that she'd been a thorn in my side for nearly 2 weeks and had cut me off to get her way, I was fed up. I retorted, "I doubt you were looking. You were probably just with the guy you've been seeing since you cut me off." As she yelled, "You bastard, how can you think that of me?" I turned back to the TV. It's just as easy for me to think that about you as it is for you to think it about me. Besides, didn't you just say you were out looking? She stormed out of the room, and I went back to watching TV. To avoid another locked door, I decided to hit the sack early. I was reading in bed when Doris came in and said, "I don't want you in here with me." "Tough luck, Doris. I slept on the couch last night, so if you don't want to be in here with me, you can sleep on the couch tonight." She slammed the door behind her as she left. The next morning, I was up and out before Doris woke. I enjoyed the peace of starting my day without any more arguments. When I got home from work that evening and pulled into the driveway, I was stunned to see a pile of clothes scattered across the front lawn. As I got out of the truck, I realized it was all my stuff. My clothes were everywhere. What the hell was Doris up to now? The front door was locked, and my key wouldn't work. I tried the back door, but it was locked as well. Doris had locked me out of the house. That was it. This was the last straw. I went back to the truck, grabbed the tire iron from behind the seat, and headed back to the porch. Since Doris was going to have to deal with the mess, I used the tire iron to smash the large picture window. I went inside, grabbed a bunch of garbage bags, and started collecting all my clothes from the lawn, putting them in the back of the truck. Then I went through the house, taking everything I wanted. I had a separate savings account for vacations where I deposited 10% of my paycheck. Before I disconnected the computer, I went online and transferred all the funds from our savings and checking accounts into the vacation account, which Doris couldn't access. I used the phone to cancel all our credit cards except for the American Express in my name, which I kept for business travel. I wasn't sure what Doris thought she was achieving, but she should have known I wouldn't just sit back and take it. Lock me out of the house? Fine. Let's see how she enjoys living alone with no credit and only her job to rely on for money. I drove away from the house and headed for a nearby motel. I was just finishing moving my last few things into the motel room when my cell phone rang. Seeing that the call wasn't from Doris, I answered. Hello? Frank, this is Ray Hendrickson. I hope I'm not intruding, but I thought you should know that Doris is at the hitching post with Mel Timmons, and they're being quite affectionate. Affectionate? What do you mean? They're sitting together in a back booth. Mel's got his arm around her and was nuzzling her neck. She didn't seem to be pushing him away. Thanks for the update, Ray. I appreciate it. When I arrived at work the next morning, Stella, our receptionist, handed me several messages. 3 were from Doris, and I tossed them in the trash without reading them. I instructed Stella to tell Doris I was either in a meeting or out of the office, and if she pressed, to say that I specifically didn't want to hear from her. Trouble at home? Stella asked. Not for much longer, I replied. Around 10 o'clock, things slowed down enough for me to make a call to a friend who had recently gone through a divorce. He gave me the name of the attorney he used. I called and scheduled an appointment for the next day. I wasn't ready to dive into divorce proceedings just yet, but I wanted to be prepared if it came to that. There was a bar across the street from the motel, so before heading to my room, I stopped in for a few beers and watched the basketball game on their TV. I had no stake in the game, but it provided a distraction. The next day, I received some sobering news from the attorney. Since we lived in a no-fault state, the divorce would result in an even split of our assets. Given that I earned nearly twice as much as Doris, I would be required to pay her alimony. Additionally, since I would be the one initiating the divorce, I would be responsible for all court costs, including my own attorney's fees. If Doris contested the divorce, I could potentially be liable for her attorney's fees as well, depending on the judge's decision. The only saving grace was that we didn't have any children. This information made me reconsider my position. In the end, it might be more cost-effective to stay married, but live separately. If Doris didn't like that arrangement, she could file for divorce, and at least then, I wouldn't have to bear the cost of court and her attorney fees. I left the attorney's office resolved to find a reasonable apartment close to work and start moving on with my life. Good morning. Thank you for calling Benton & Associates. How can I assist you? Doris, it's Steph. Hi, Steph. What's going on? Is everything okay between you and Frank? Why do you ask? You know I work in the Marston building, right? This morning I saw Frank leaving Tucker Davidson's office. Why are you mentioning that? Tucker is a divorce attorney. Oh no. Not good, huh? Definitely not. I've got a bunch of calls coming in, so I need to go. Can you meet me for lunch at Maxine's? Around noon? Sure thing. After the waitress took their order, Doris asked, "Does Tucker only handle divorces?" "Yep. His practice is all about family law, which mostly means divorces. Are you and Frank having issues?" "Kind of." "Kind of sounds like more than just a little problem if Frank is seeing Tucker." Doris then explained the situation to Steph. "You've got to be kidding me, Doris. After all this time with Frank, you really think he'd do something like that? Frank would never get involved in something like that, just like you'd never pull a stunt like that at a frat party." "But he did. Mel Timmons called me and told me." "Mel did what?" "He called to tell me what Frank supposedly did." "Why would Mel do that?" "Mel's always been interested in me, but I was with Frank. After I married Frank, Mel told me I'd regret choosing him over Mel. Now he's calling to gloat, saying my supposedly loving husband was with 2 strippers." "And you believed him?" "Frank confirmed it the next morning. He said he was going to meet one of the strippers and left the house." "That doesn't sound like the Frank I know." Doris recounted the morning's events to Steph, who responded with concern. "And you didn't give Frank the benefit of the doubt? You didn't consider that maybe he was just helping someone with a car issue? After what Mel said? No, I didn't." "So, based on a phone call, you decided to throw Frank under the bus?" "It wasn't just a phone call. Mel claimed he had pictures. After Frank left to meet the stripper, I met Mel at Denny's. He went into detail about the evening, saying there were 2 strippers and that Frank had been with both of them multiple times. Mel even suggested that I doubted him, so he offered to show me the photos. He said if I met him at the hitching post the next night, he'd show me the evidence." "Why didn't he show them to you at Denny's?" "He'd left his phone charging and didn't have it with him. When I got home, I made Frank think I'd been out looking for someone to get even with him. I shouldn't have done that. Frank ended up accusing me of cheating for weeks. That night I slept on the couch, and in the morning I was so angry I threw all of Frank's clothes out onto the front lawn and called a locksmith to change the locks." "How did Frank react to that?" "Not well. He broke a window to get into the house, took what he wanted, and left." "What did he say to you?" "I haven't been able to reach him. He won't answer my calls. I tried paying for the window repair with my credit card, but it was declined, so I had to write a check." "I hope you called the bank before writing that check. If Frank was angry enough to cancel your credit cards, he might have emptied the bank accounts too." "Oh no, this just keeps getting worse." "What about Mel's pictures?" "I met him at the hitching post, and he showed me 2 photos. They only showed Frank watching some guys with the strippers. Frank's the only face visible. When I asked if that was all he had, he said no, but he wanted something from me before he'd show the rest. Let me guess. He wanted you to let him help you get even with Frank before showing the good stuff?" "Yes, that's what he implied." "And did you?" "Absolutely not. I only got a bit touchy-feely with him to try to get him to show me the rest of the photos." "And did he show them to you?" Number I refused to go with him to his place, so he didn't show me anything more." "Did it not occur to you that he might not have had any more pictures? If he did, he would have shown them to you to make you more upset and eager to get revenge." "I didn't think of that." "Did it also not cross your mind what you were doing? The hitching post is a hangout for many of Frank's friends. Didn't you consider that someone might see you with Mel and tell Frank? No wonder Frank was seeing Tucker. It sounds like you've really messed things up with your marriage." "I can't believe Frank would do this." "Dory, I'm not a man, so I can't fully understand how Frank would react to what you've put him through. But if it were me in his position, I'd be signing the divorce papers right now. If you want to keep him, you need to find a way to reach out to him before things spiral even further." The intercom buzzed, and I pressed the button. "Yes?" "I know you told me not to take messages from your wife or put her through to you," Stella said, "but there's been a development." "What kind of development?" "She's here in the lobby and says she won't leave until she talks to you." "Tell her I'm busy and that I won't speak with her during work hours." There was a pause before Stella responded. "She said to tell you she brought a book and plans to sit here and read until you're done for the day." I glanced at my watch. It was 3 hours until quitting time. What I was working on wasn't urgent, and I could have left early, but I was in no mood to cut Doris any slack. I needed to remove Stella from the middle of this, and I would have to face Doris sooner or later. I told Stella to let Doris enjoy her book. At 4:15, Doris's cousin and best friend, Stephanie, called. "How's everything going, Frank?" "Could be better, Steph. What's up?" "I had lunch with Dory today, and she's a mess. She told me what's been happening, and while I agree she's made some poor choices, I don't think it's reached the point of divorce." "Why do you mention divorce?" "I saw you leaving Tucker Davidson's office. Divorce is his specialty." "When Dory told you what was going on, did she mention the cheating allegations?" "She didn't cheat on you, Frank. Timmons claimed he had compromising photos of you from the stag party and tried to convince her to get back at you by sleeping with him. She led him on to try and get the photos, but swears she didn't go through with anything." "I believe her. You two need to have a serious talk." "Maybe, Steph, but there's more going on than just what she might have done with Timmons. I'm not sure talking will solve everything. But you're right, I'll have to address it with her eventually. Thanks for letting me know, but I'm busy right now. I need to go." "All right, Frank, good luck." "Thanks, Steph." At 5 o'clock, I saved my work, shut down the computer, and went to confront Doris. As I entered the reception area, she looked up from her book with a worried expression. She stood up, and I said, "I'll meet you at the hitching post. We can sit in the same booth where you were with Timmons and talk there," and then walked past her. On my way, I stopped at a gas station to fill up, which meant Doris got to the bar before me. She was seated in one of the back booths, and I remembered Ray's tip about Doris and Timmons being in a back booth. I wondered if she had chosen this one because she took my comment literally. I approached and sat down opposite Doris. When Alice came over to take our order, I said, "Just a bud for me, Alice, and make it separate checks." The look of surprise on Doris's face was almost worth the hassle. As Alice walked away, I said, "All right, Doris, you called this meeting. Let's hear what you have to say. Why did you cancel our credit cards and empty our bank accounts?" "Oh, come on, Doris. You're not naive. You tossed all my stuff out of the house and had the locks changed, which was pretty clear you didn't want me around anymore. I took the hint and decided if I was leaving, I wasn't going to keep footing the bill for you. I canceled the cards so you couldn't rack up more debt, and as for the bank accounts, well, you kicked me out, so I figured you'd cover the cost of my move. Your share of the money can help with that. Besides, you have the house, which is worth more than what was in the bank. You'll also be responsible for the mortgage and utilities from now on. It might be tight with your salary, but hey, it's what you wanted, right?" "No, Frank, that's not what I wanted. I overreacted to you going to that party and then seeing the stripper. It turned out just like I feared, a drunken orgy. So what does that have to do with me? Just because I was at that party doesn't mean I had any involvement in it. And what about when you go out for drinks with your coworkers? I know Linda Bliss and Joyce Baker meet guys at the bar and end up in their cars. Are you saying that just because you're there, you're also up to something? That's different." "No, it isn't, Doris. You're saying I'm guilty by association, so by the same logic, you must be guilty if you're there when Linda and Joyce hook up. I didn't do anything with those strippers other than give them a ride home when their car broke down. I even went back the next day to fix their car. All I got was a kiss on the cheek and a thank you, and that was all I expected. I helped them because they were in trouble, and I was in a position to help. I've done the same for others. Just because they were strippers doesn't mean I should have turned my back on them. Why didn't you explain that to me?" "Why bother, Doris? You haven't listened to anything I've said in the past 2 weeks. Why would I expect you to listen to me now?" "Okay, Frank, I'll admit I was wrong." She opened her purse, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" "A key to the new locks, so you can come home." I pushed the envelope back toward Doris and said, "I don't think so. The bachelor party and the strippers are just part of the issue. There are other problems I'm dealing with. For one, I'm fed up with you using sex as a weapon to get me to do what you want. And frankly, I'm not sure I want to live with someone I suspect might be cheating on me. I meant what I said Sunday morning. If you enjoy sex as much as I do, then the fact that you weren't suffering during those 2 weeks without it makes me wonder if you were really going without. Especially after hearing about you and Mel Timmons, I don't see why I should come home. Damn it, Frank. You should know me better than that. I was just angry and trying to get a rise out of you. I would never cheat on you. That's not what I'm hearing. My information is that Mel Timmons was helping you get even for what you thought I did at the bachelor party. I didn't do anything with Mel. Well, maybe I led him on a bit. He claimed he had photos of you with the strippers and asked if I wanted to see them. I said yes, but I didn't actually see any explicit photos. And did you see any pictures of me with those girls? All he had were 2 pictures of you just watching. He said he had more explicit ones, but I wasn't willing to give him what he wanted in exchange for them. I did kiss him a couple of times and let him get a bit touchy-feely, but that's it. Do you have any way to prove that? Doris thought for a moment before replying. I think I do. Your friend Ronnie Thomas and his wife were there. I stopped to say hi to them as I was leaving. They can confirm that I left alone and that Mel was still there when I left. How can I be sure you didn't meet up with him later? How do I know you didn't leave alone just to mislead my friends? You know what I mean? I'll leave first so no one sees us together. I'll meet you at your place. How can I be certain that's not how it went? Damn it, Frank. What do you want? A lie detector test? Fine, set it up, and I'll take it. So, Doris, how does it feel to deny something and still not be believed? It sucks, Frank. Earlier you said I should know you better than to believe everything I hear. Shouldn't you have trusted me more too? After all these years together, did you really think so little of me? I'm sorry, Frank. Looking back, I can see I wasn't being rational. I knew about the problems bachelor parties often cause, and I didn't want you to go. Even though I should have trusted you, part of me was worried that any man might lose control in that situation, especially with a naked woman available. When you said you were going to see a stripper the next morning, it only fueled my fears. I was devastated, especially after seeing how Ron left his wife and kids for someone he met at a bachelor party. You didn't make things better, and when I snapped at you, you should have understood how I felt. Why didn't you invite me to come along if you weren't doing anything wrong? Why didn't you say, come and see for yourself, instead of leaving me to stew in my fears? So now you're saying this is my fault, Doris. I can't accept that. Everything that's happened is a result of your actions. Just because you pushed and pushed until I finally stood up for myself doesn't mean it's my fault. Can't we just move past this, Frank? I love you and need you with me. Please, take the key and come home. As she pushed the envelope with the key back to me, she looked up and said, Hi, Brenda. I turned and saw Brenda, my favorite stripper, standing there. She greeted me with a smile. Hi, Frank. Doris looked from me to Brenda and back, clearly puzzled. You two know each other? Yes, I said. And I assume you know each other as well? Brenda works with me, Doris said. Actually, that's not quite right. I work for her. She's the office manager. I gestured for Brenda to join us, and she sat down next to Doris, across from me. I didn't mean to intrude, Brenda said, but when I saw 2 of my favorite people together, I had to come over and say hi. Frank is one of your favorite people? How do you know my husband? Doris asked. Brenda looked at me, clearly surprised. You and Dory? I nodded in affirmation. The question of how Brenda knew me hung in the air, and I could see Doris was not aware of Brenda's night job as a stripper. It seemed Brenda preferred to keep that part of her life private from her co-workers. Unsure how to answer Doris's question without exposing Brenda, I gave Brenda a look that said, You handle this. Brenda met my gaze and seemed to understand. She took a deep breath and prepared to respond. Brenda chuckled and said, I tried to steal Frank away from his wife, but he wouldn't bite. I thought I was one of the most beautiful and alluring women in the state, and he wouldn't even take my number. You tried to steal my husband? Doris asked, incredulous. I didn't know he was your husband, Brenda replied. He was wearing gloves, so I couldn't see a ring. Marcia and I were here having drinks when some guy who'd had too much to drink started making unwanted advances. He was really obnoxious, and when I refused to dance with him, he got verbally abusive. I was so fed up that I threw a drink in his face. He got aggressive, and Frank just happened to be leaving at that moment. He stepped in, handled the guy, and kicked him out. Frank told him if he tried to come back, he'd make sure he'd end up in the dumpster. After that, Frank came back in and offered to walk Marcia and me to our cars to make sure we were safe from the guy. He was like a knight in shining armor, handsome and all. I tried to make a move, but he just smiled, thanked me for the drink, and left. The next time I saw him, he let me buy him a drink, but that was as far as it went. It was probably for the best. Marcia had her eye on him too, and we would have ended up fighting over him and probably not been roommates anymore. Marcia wanted my husband too, Doris said, contemplating. Yep, Brenda replied. You get a pass from me, though. It wouldn't be smart to mess with the boss. Doris smiled slightly. Good call. Now that I see you two together, I can understand why I couldn't win him over. I don't feel so bad about being turned down now. As the band set up and started their first number, Brenda turned to me and asked, Mind if I dance with my hero? I was pretty sure Doris wouldn't be thrilled, but she seemed hesitant to refuse her boss, so she nodded and said it was fine. As Brenda and I moved into a waltz, I said, Nice save, Donna? Or should I say Brenda? Brenda's the name I use at work. I don't use my real name for parties, she replied. Guess that means Missy is actually Marcia? Exactly. I had no idea you were Dory's husband. Why would you? You've never seen us together. With all the talk she does about you, I should have recognized you from her descriptions. Has anything improved since we last spoke? Actually, things have gotten worse, I said, recounting the recent events. Brenda looked shocked. That doesn't sound like the Doris I know. Frank, believe me, she would never cheat on you. When she talks about you at work, it makes the other girls mad. Mad? Why would they be mad? Because according to Doris, you're perfect. She makes it sound like you can do no wrong. According to her, you walk on water. Why does she even talk about me? Usually it's not about you specifically. When the girls gripe about their partners, Doris will chime in with her perspective. She thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread. She wouldn't cheat on you. Sure, she might get annoyed and push your buttons. But cheating? No way. I'm not so sure, Brenda. Her tone and the way she spoke didn't sound like she was just messing with me. I don't hang out with the crew often after work, since I usually have other appointments. But when I do, Dory's never been more than friendly with the guys who hit on her. A few girls might step out to the parking lot, and Doris looks at them like they're disgusting. She even avoids talking to Joyce and Linda because they cheat on their husbands. There's no way Doris would cheat on you. Whatever problems you're facing, that's not one of them. As the music ended and we walked back to the booth, Brenda said, I'm going to upset your wife when we get back. When I do, remember this. Doris is my friend, but if you can't work things out with her, I meant it when I said to give me a call. At the booth, Brenda gave me a quick kiss on the lips, grabbed her purse, and said she had to leave. Turning to Doris, she added, Take good care of my hero. I'll see you at work. Once Brenda had gone, Doris asked, You turned her down? She was joking about being one of the most beautiful and sexy women in the state, but the truth is, she is. And you turned her down? Of course I did. I'm a married man. I made promises in front of a church full of people, and I honor those promises, even if others don't. Damn it, Frank. I told you I'd take a lie detector test if I had to. I did not cheat on you. Here's how I see it, Doris. You created this mess, so if it's going to get cleaned up, it's up to you to fix it. I stood up to leave. Doris called after me. What do you mean, Frank? Where are you going? We need to settle this. You need to come home. Think about it, Doris. Maybe you'll figure it out, I replied. I left the bar and went to my room. As I emptied my pockets onto the dresser, I noticed I had picked up the envelope with the key that Doris had tried to give me. Was it a sign? The next 2 days were packed with activity. I flew to Denver for a series of meetings that turned out to be highly productive, potentially leading to a substantial bonus for me. In a great mood, I decided to celebrate by treating myself to a nice dinner at my favorite steakhouse upon my return. I had just settled in when Brenda, Marcia, and 2 men walked in and were seated across the room. Brenda spotted me, flashed a big smile, and whispered something to Marcia. Marcia looked over, waved, and smiled. I couldn't help but think how lucky those 2 men were to be with Brenda and Marcia. I also wondered why I had turned down the opportunity to be with them. It had been nearly a month since I'd been intimate, and it seemed like it would be quite a while longer before that changed. As I was finishing my dessert, Brenda got up and came over to my table. "Come on over and join us, Frank. I wouldn't want to intrude on your business dinner." "It's not a date, Frank. We're actually working out details for a bachelor party with these guys. I mentioned you as a satisfied customer, and they asked me to invite you. I think they want your feedback on whether we were worth the price. I didn't partake in the festivities, so I'm not sure how I can judge. But you saw everything. Did you notice any disappointment?" "No, not at all." "You don't have to mention that you didn't play. Just say that everyone had a fantastic time." "I suppose I could do that." I joined the group, answered their questions, and it seemed the men were satisfied. One of them picked up the check, and they both stood to leave. As Don shook hands with Brenda and Marcia, he said, "We'll see you Friday at 7, before both men departed. "All right, Frank," Marcia said. "Now you're alone with 2 hot women who want you. What are you going to do?" "Head back to my room and cry." "Why would you do that?" "Look, ladies, if I were single, I'd be thrilled to have either of you. But I'm married, and I take that commitment seriously. Cheating on my wife is not something I will do." Marcia exchanged a look with Brenda that I couldn't quite read, and Brenda said, "At least have a drink with us." "Sure, I can do that." I spent the next couple of hours having drinks with them before calling it a night. I spent some time reflecting on the situation with Doris, and by the end of the day, I decided to drop by the house for another conversation. I was fairly convinced she was honest about Timmons, but we still needed to address her tendency to cut me off whenever she didn't get her way. Using the new key, I let myself in, and as I walked through the front door, I heard Doris speaking in the kitchen. I hadn't anticipated anyone else being there, and I was about to turn and leave when I realized she had the phone on speaker, which she often did while working in the kitchen. The voice on the other end sounded like Brenda, so I stopped and listened. "If you and Marcia couldn't tempt him, I doubt those strippers at the bachelor party had any luck." "All right, it's confession time, girlfriend. The story I gave you about meeting Frank was pure bullshit. Marcia and I were the strippers at that party, and everything Frank told you was spot on. Our car wouldn't start, he gave us a ride home, and then came back the next morning to fix it. Marcia and I pretty much threw ourselves at him, but all he allowed was a kiss on the cheek. He was in a rough spot, and I asked him about it. He ended up opening up about the issues with his wife. I told him if things didn't work out, he should call me. Of course, I didn't realize you were his wife at the time. You've got a gem there, girlfriend, and you need to do whatever it takes to hold on to him. My problem is that I've painted myself into a corner, and now I'm stuck." "How so?" "I told him I'd take a lie detector test to prove I wasn't lying when I said I hadn't cheated on him with Mel. I thought he'd say it wasn't necessary, because why would I offer if I had something to hide, right? But he said since I created this mess, it's up to me to clean it up. I took that to mean I should set up and take the test." "So just do it." "I can't. It would prove I didn't cheat with Mel, but you can bet one of the questions would be, have you ever cheated on your husband? And we both know I wouldn't pass that." "Why not?" "Have you forgotten the 3 parties I worked with you all those years ago?" "Oh, right. I'd forgotten about those, but that was over 6 years ago. But I was married at the time. The question would be, have you ever cheated on your husband? I'm trapped. If I take the test, I'll fail it. If I don't, Frank will assume I'm hiding something because I knew I couldn't pass. I'm stuck either way. I never asked before, but why did you stop working parties? You were a hit with the men and seemed to enjoy it. I didn't just enjoy it. I loved it. I loved it so much that I wanted to keep going, but I knew if I did, Frank would eventually find out. No matter how much I loved it, it would cost me Frank, and I couldn't let that happen. He means the world to me. If you feel that way, why did you do those parties in the first place? Frank had been away on a project for over 3 months and wouldn't be home for another 2 or 3 months. I was incredibly frustrated and lonely. Listening to you and Marcia talk about the fun you had at those parties only made things worse. You made it sound so exciting that I volunteered to help. It was mind-blowing, Bren, and I still think about it and wish I could do it again. But it came down to a choice between that and Frank will always come first. Oh God, Bren, what am I going to do? I can't lose Frank. I just can't. You're not going to like this, but you're right. You've painted yourself into a corner. The only hope I see is to come clean. I haven't known Frank long, but from what I've seen, he values honesty. From how he acted when I threw myself at him, I can tell he cares about you deeply. I'd suggest you sit down with him and tell him everything. At this point, you have nothing to lose by being honest. If there's any way I can help, let me know. I've got to go. See you tomorrow at work. I quietly left the house and headed back to my motel room. My Doris involved in those kinds of activities at bachelor parties? I could never have imagined it. It changed everything. While Doris hadn't been unfaithful with Timmons, she had been unfaithful in a much bigger way. When I initially went back with my new key, my goal was to bridge the gap between us. But overhearing that conversation had completely altered my perspective. I was at a loss for what to do next. Forget it. I wasn't going to stay cooped up in my room, driving myself crazy. I grabbed my keys and headed over to the hitching post. After a couple of beers and a few games of pool, I saw Mel Timmons come in with an attractive redhead. I decided it was time to make his evening a bit more unpleasant. I waited until they were seated and had their drinks before I approached their table. Hey Mel, I hear you told my wife you had some pictures of me doing things I shouldn't have been at Jim's bachelor party. She mentioned you told her that if she got involved with you, you'd show her those photos. How about you show them to me instead? I'm not interested in anything you have to offer, but given my mood, I'm ready to make you regret ever crossing me. Back off, Frank. I'm not scared of you. Good to hear. If you were, you'd avoid me, and I wouldn't have a chance to confront you. Whether I win or lose doesn't matter. I just want to make sure you feel the consequences of your actions. Let's handle this another time, Frank. I'm with someone right now. I glanced at the woman and said, "Let me give you a little background. This guy has been trying to get into my wife's pants for ages. Last week at Jim's bachelor party, he called her after it was over and claimed he had photos of me cheating with the strippers. He told her that if she slept with him, he'd show her those photos. Now we're separated. Is this really the kind of guy you want to be with?" She glanced at Timmons and then back at me before saying, "No, but I don't have a way to get home if I leave him." "You do have options. I'd be happy to give you a ride, but if you'd rather not take that chance, I can cover a cab fare for you. The problem is, I just got here and was looking forward to a fun night." "Do you play pool?" "Yes." "Then come join us at the pool tables. You can shoot with us, and when the band starts, Dave, Jim, and I can keep you dancing until you're ready to head out." Without a word to Mel, she stood up and said, "Let's go." I turned to Mel and said, "This isn't over, Mel. Sooner or later, we'll meet somewhere where we don't have to worry about the cops. And one more thing. Every time I see you with a girl here, I'll do exactly what I did tonight." I followed the redhead to the pool tables. Her name was Hannah, and she turned out to be a lot of fun and pretty skilled at pool. We played until the band started, and then I asked her to dance. As we danced, she asked how much of what I'd said about Mel was true, and I replied, "All of it." "Have you and your wife worked things out yet?" "Not yet, and I'm not sure we will." "So, is hooking up with me your way of getting back at Mel and hoping to get back at your wife?" "Not at all. Messing with Mel? Absolutely. But despite what my wife has done, I don't cheat. I meant what I said. If it were just a ride home or a cab, I'd be straightforward about it. If I were separated or going through a divorce, I'd be pursuing you with more intention." I think I believe you, which is strange because I usually don't trust married men all that much. As the music played, Dave, Jim, and I kept Hannah on the dance floor for the next 2 hours. I noticed Mel hanging back, taking pictures with his cell phone. I suspected Doris would be getting a call from him soon. Around 11, Hannah mentioned she needed to leave since she had work the next day. "Should I call you a cab?" "No, I'll take you up on that ride offer." During the drive, we chatted, and I learned she was a legal secretary who had met Mel during a consultation at her firm. He seemed like a nice guy. Guess I'm not great at spotting the bad ones. I'm biased because of what he tried to do to my wife, but honestly, there aren't many guys who wouldn't make a move if they thought they had a chance. She's really that attractive? Remember, I'm biased. When we arrived at her place, she leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, handing me a slip of paper with her number on it. I might not be great at spotting the bad ones, but I'm pretty good at recognizing the good ones. If things don't work out, give me a call. I drove away feeling pretty good. That feeling lasted until I got to my room. Just as I was opening the door, my cell phone rang. The display showed it was Doris. I answered, "Yes?" "I need to talk to you, Frank. Can you come over after work tomorrow?" "No, I can't make it tomorrow." "How about the day after?" "Yeah, I can do that." 7 o'clock? I'll make dinner?" "No dinner, Doris, but I'll be there at 7. I could have made it the next day, but I had a hunch about what Doris might say, and there was something I needed to do before our talk. I sifted through my wallet until I found the piece of paper I was looking for. I stared at it for a few moments, weighing my decision, and decided I was going to go through with it. Even though it was late, I dialed the number. When Brenda answered, I said, "I need a huge favor." She was waiting for me in a booth at the back. As I sat down, she said, "Okay, Frank, you have my full attention. You mentioned that I might help you fix things with Doris. What can I do for you?" "I need to know everything you know about Doris. Skip the nice stuff. I'm only interested in the bad. It's the bad that I need to deal with." "I'm not sure I have that kind of information." "You do, Brenda, and it won't help if you pretend otherwise. I know about the 3 gangbangs she participated in at bachelor parties while I was away in Alaska for 5 months. Her face went pale. "You know about that?" "Yes, I do." What I need to know now is what I don't know. What else is there that I'm unaware of? If I'm going to consider reconciling with Doris, I need to grant full amnesty, but I want to know exactly what I'm forgiving. There won't be any second chances. If Doris confesses, I want the whole truth, not just part of it. If I later find out there was more she didn't disclose, we're done. I'll walk away and not look back. And if there's anything else, I'll eventually find out just like I found out about the bachelor parties. How do you know I suggested she confess? Trade secret. The main thing is, if she does confess, I need to hear everything. If I offer forgiveness based on what she tells me and later find out there was more to the story, it's over. So, tell me about the bachelor parties and whatever else you know. What is there to tell? You saw the one where we met, and they're all pretty much the same. The only difference is the faces. How did she get involved? All the girls at work knew about Marcia and me. We didn't mean for them to find out, but Sandy's husband attended one of the parties and took some photos on his cell phone. Sandy discovered these photos and recognized us. She showed them to the office girls, and our secret was out. The reaction was completely unexpected. Instead of shaming us, the girls were fascinated. They wanted to know what it was like, how we got started, and why we did it. Some even said they were interested in trying it themselves, so Marcia and I set them up. Both tried it once and decided it wasn't for them. Dory was one of those who was curious. She kept asking about what we did, how we did it, and I could tell she was interested in trying, but was hesitant. One day during lunch, Dory noticed I was in a bad mood and asked why. I told her Marcia was sick, and I was going to have to handle a party with 12 to 14 guys on my own. Dory offered to step in for Marcia. I asked her if she knew what she was getting into, and she said she had no idea, but it was something she'd wanted to try ever since she first heard about it. I asked her why she was willing to risk her marriage, and she told me it was because you'd been away for 3 months and wouldn't be back for at least 2 more. She felt so frustrated and lonely that she felt like she'd love 100 men. She figured you'd never find out, so she didn't see it as a real risk. She joined me that night and enjoyed it so much that she did it 2 more times. After that, she said she couldn't continue, and as far as I know, she hasn't. I'm having a hard time believing she could go from being a faithful wife to participating in gangbangs overnight. It seems like there would have been some kind of transition, perhaps a brief affair or some parking lot encounters. I just can't see how a devoted wife on Tuesday could suddenly engage in this kind of activity by Wednesday. I don't know what to tell you, Frank. I wasn't there every night the girls worked, so I don't know what happened when I wasn't around. But on the nights I was there, I only saw her dancing with guys who asked her. Beyond that, I wouldn't know. I hadn't really expected to get much from Brenda. If she did know anything, I doubted she'd share it because she was Dory's friend and barely knew me. What I did expect was that she would tell Doris about our conversation and advise her to be completely honest if she was going to follow Brenda's suggestion to confess. I was considering trying to mend things with Doris. One thing was clear from that overheard phone conversation. Doris loved me and didn't want to lose me. Yes, she had cheated on me, but it was 6 years ago, and she had stopped as soon as she realized it could jeopardize our marriage. I was furious about the cheating, and especially about how it happened. But it was 6 years ago, and it hadn't caused any harm to us in the present. I rang the doorbell and waited. When there was no answer, I rang it again and waited some more. Just as I was about to ring it a 3rd time and head back to my truck, I heard the door open behind me. "Where are you going, Frank?" Doris called out. "When you didn't answer, I figured you changed your mind about talking, so I was leaving." "I didn't answer because this is your house. You could have just opened the door and walked in." "This isn't my house, Doris. Have you already forgotten that you threw all my things out onto the lawn and locked me out? Let's not argue, Frank. Please, just come inside." Once I was in, Doris asked if I preferred to sit in the living room or the kitchen, and I chose the kitchen. I took a seat at the table while Doris went to the fridge and grabbed 2 beers. She opened them and set one in front of me. I took a sip from the bottle, placed it back on the table, and said, "All right, Doris, you called this meeting. What do you want to talk about?" She stared at her beer bottle for a few moments, then looked up at me and said, "I need you to believe me when I say that I love you. I truly do, Frank, and the thought of losing you is devastating. I've come to accept that I might have lost you, and I have no one to blame but myself. I messed up the other night when I said I'd take a lie detector test to prove I didn't sleep with Mel Timmons. I would have passed that test, Frank, if the only question was whether I had sex with Mel. But then I realized that there would be more questions, and one of them would likely be, have you ever cheated on your husband? I couldn't pass that one. I have cheated on you, but it was a long time ago. I've put it behind me, and honestly, it didn't harm our marriage. If anything, it made our relationship stronger because it made me see how much I had to lose if you ever found out. It probably sounds ridiculous, but cheating actually made me a better wife to you. Even I think it sounds crazy, but it's the truth. I believe I became a better wife, or at least, I hope I did." She looked at me, clearly expecting some response, but I just sat quietly, sipping my beer and waiting for her to continue. When she realized I wasn't going to speak, she resumed. It happened 6 years ago when you were in Alaska on that temporary assignment. I was so used to us making love 4 or 5 times a week that going without sex was almost unbearable. After about 2 months, I began thinking about having an affair. I mulled it over extensively and decided to go through with it since you were so far away in Alaska and wouldn't find out. I went on a few dates, but when it came time to make a move, I backed off. I know myself well, Frank. I knew that if I got involved with someone, I'd become emotionally attached, and I didn't want that. I wasn't looking to replace you. I just wanted to get laid. I did some heavy necking and even got a little carried away a few times. I was in a bad place. I wanted it, needed it, craved it, but I couldn't bring myself to take that final step. I didn't trust myself not to get emotionally involved. Then, an opportunity came up to fulfill a fantasy without any risk of emotional entanglement. Not only would it avoid emotional involvement, but it would also allow me to live out a fantasy I'd been harboring for some time. She glanced at me, likely waiting for me to comment on the fantasies, but I remained silent, so she continued. You've met Brenda, and while you might not suspect it, she works evenings as a stripper and does bachelor parties. One of the girls at work discovered this, and we all started asking her about it. The more I heard, the more curious I became about what it would be like. I started having fantasies about it. It sounded incredibly exciting, but at the time, they were just fantasies. Becky and Karen decided to try it and convinced Brenda to set up a party for them. They both said it was incredible and that they loved the experience, but once was enough for them. Even though I was incredibly tempted, I doubt I would have had the courage to ask Brenda to arrange one for me. But one day, Brenda was visibly upset, and I asked her what was wrong. She told me that Marcia, another co-worker who worked parties with her, was sick and couldn't make it to one of their scheduled events. Brenda was stressed because she'd have to handle a dozen guys on her own, and she wasn't looking forward to it. For some reason, I volunteered to take Marcia's place for that party. It turned out to be exactly as Becky and Karen had described, mind-blowing and exhilarating. I loved it so much that I ended up doing it 2 more times. I wanted to continue, but I realized that I couldn't keep it hidden forever. If I kept going, you would eventually find out, and I knew how devastating that would be for you. I couldn't risk losing you, Frank. You mean the world to me. I have never loved anyone or anything as much as I love you. So I walked away from the parties, even though I enjoyed them immensely. Seeing how men behaved in that setting was also why I was so against you going. It's been years, but I still think about those 3 events and wish there was a way I could have both worlds. But here we are, 6 years later, and those parties have cost me you. I only have myself to blame. If I hadn't been involved with Mel and then made that terrible decision to try and make you believe I was getting back at you, I wouldn't have ended up in the position of having to take a lie detector test, a test I couldn't possibly pass. I'm so sorry, Frank. I am truly sorry for everything I've done to us. I studied her face carefully and then said, Take the test, Doris. If you can prove that the 3 parties you mentioned are the only times you've been unfaithful, I'll come back and we can discuss things further. With that, I got up and left the house. I believed her, but even so, I felt compelled to make her experience some of the pain I'd been feeling. When I was in Alaska, I was just as tempted as she was, but I remained faithful because I trusted and loved her. Letting her sit alone, thinking she had lost me, felt like a small measure of payback. Some might have thought, she owes me, so I'll just call up Brenda and Marcia to even the score, but that wasn't how I operated. Damn the bad luck. The next day at 4, Stella buzzed me on the intercom. Still avoiding your wife's calls? Number put her through. The phone rang, and I answered. Yes? It's Doris. I found someone to give me the test. His name is Josh Barnum, and his number is 713-555-1863. He wants to talk to you to understand what you need so he can ask the right questions. If you call him by noon tomorrow, he can schedule the test for 10 a.m. Thursday and have the results ready by mid to late afternoon. Okay, Doris, I'll call him as soon as we hang up. I love you, Frank. I really do. Sure you do, Doris, I said before ending the call. I dialed Barnum, explained the situation, and outlined my concerns and what I needed from the test. After the call, I reached out to my cousin Lou, who's a cop, and asked him to look into Barnum. Lou got back to me at 6, saying Barnum was frequently used by the department and had a solid reputation. I went to my room feeling reassured that the test would be legitimate. If Doris passed, we'd have another discussion. If she didn't, well, I was already out. The next 2 days flew by, and at noon on Thursday, Doris called to inform me that she had taken the test and signed a release allowing Barnum to share the results with me. Since she was covering the cost of the test, she had to sign the release. Although Doris had told me the results wouldn't be available until mid to late afternoon, I was surprised when Barnum called me at 2:15. The results are clear. Besides the instances she mentioned, she was truthful about any other instances of unfaithfulness. I hope this helps to ease your mind. It does. Thanks for the call. As soon as I left the office, my cell rang. It was Doris. Did you get the results? Yes. So, are you coming home? I'll stop by tomorrow and we can talk then. Tomorrow? Why not tonight? I still need some time to think things through. How about tomorrow at 7? Can't you come tonight? No, I need the time. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, ending the call. I spent the evening in my room, contemplating what to say to Doris. She had passed the lie detector test, but there was still one more issue that needed to be addressed before we could move forward. The next day, I walked up the front steps, and as I reached the top, Doris opened the door. Kitchen? She asked, and I nodded. We headed that way, and she pulled 2 beers from the fridge. We sat down at the table, and I took a swig of the Budweiser before speaking. You passed the lie detector test, but the fact remains that you did cheat on me while I was in Alaska. I listened to your reasons, but I have to say they don't change how I feel. I was dealing with the same lack of intimacy, but I stayed faithful because I promised to when we got married. I'm torn between being angrier about the cheating itself or how you went about it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I've decided that I can move past it since it didn't happen again. And, for the most part, the last 6 years have been good. Until recently, I had no reason to doubt your love for me. Did you catch the, for the most part, Doris? There have been parts of those years that have been really tough. Now, I have to decide if I want to put myself back in a situation where those painful parts could resurface. I stayed true during my time in Alaska, despite the lack of sex. I suffered and honored my vows. The common thread here is that I endure the pain when there's a lack of intimacy. Over the years, including recently with the mess over Jim's bachelor party, you've used sex as a weapon against me. Each time, I've endured silently, even though every part of me wanted to say, "You don't have to put up with this, go find someone else." But I didn't, because I believe in the vows I made. I'm fed up with you using sex as a way to punish me or manipulate me into doing what you want. I understand that your body is yours, and you have the right to decide what to do with it. I know there will be times when you might not feel like making love, whether it's due to illness, a headache, or just not being in the mood. I can accept that. So, here we are. You know where I stand, and now you need to think about how you want to move forward. I swear, I'll never do it again, Frank. I promise. No, Doris, that's not enough. I don't want you to make that promise just because I've confronted you. I need you to really reflect on this and be certain that you can commit to change. If we get back together and you pull this again, I'll be done for good. Think carefully about it, Doris. I'll reach out in a couple of days for another talk. I don't need time to think, Frank. You might feel that way, but I think you do. And since I'm the one taking the risk of getting back with you, I need to be sure. I'm paying for my motel room through Sunday, so I'll call you then. We'll talk more then, I said, standing up and heading for the door. I knew I was being harsh, but I felt I needed to let her experience a bit of the pain she had caused me. I left the house and made my way to the hitching post, where I drank beer and played pool until it felt right to call it a night. On Saturday, I ran some errands, stopped by the laundromat to wash my clothes, and then found myself back at the hitching post that evening. I was enjoying a beer and shooting pool when a voice came from behind me. "Why are you wasting time playing pool when you could be dancing with me?" I turned around to see Hannah standing there. "Good point," I replied, handing my pool cue to Sam and saying, "You win, Sam." I then led Hannah out onto the dance floor. "I was surprised you didn't call after I got home the other night." "Why's that?" "Well, I thought your situation was just a line you use to let girls down easy." "Sorry to disappoint, but it's the truth. I've been watching since you arrived, and I haven't seen a woman with you. Still working things out?" "Getting close, maybe by tomorrow." "All right then, I've got you until tomorrow." "Until tomorrow?" "At least until this place closes or one of us decides to leave." When the song ended, I walked Hannah back to her table and joined her. We danced a few more times, and as we settled down after a waltz, she said, "Do you know those two women over there? They haven't taken their eyes off us since they arrived." I glanced in the direction she was pointing and saw Brenda and Marcia at a table. I waved, and they waved back. "Just two more members of my fan club. With you, that makes 3. Now that you've met them, you'll have to share me." "Why's that?" "Because they work with my wife. If we don't invite them over, they might think I'm here with you, and I wouldn't want them spreading that around to Doris." I got up and walked over to Brenda and Marcia, asking if they'd like to join Hannah and me at our table. "Won't that cramp your style?" Marcia asked. "Style?" "There's no style to cramp. Just a girl I know who asked me to dance." "You here alone?" Brenda inquired. "Yep. I came in for some pool and beer, and Hannah decided to rescue me." "I'm guessing you haven't worked things out with Doris yet," Brenda said. "We've talked, and there might be some progress. I'll know more in a day or two." Brenda raised her eyebrows, and I added, "She took your advice. I know everything now, and yes, I can get past it, but there's still one more issue we need to sort out." "What advice?" Marcia asked Brenda. "I'll explain later," Brenda replied. "So, are you joining us?" Brenda glanced at Marcia, who shrugged. "I guess we will, if only to keep you out of trouble and to look out for Doris's interests." "Bullshit," Marcia said. "I'm joining to make sure that if things don't work out with Doris, Hannah doesn't get a clear field. As far as I'm concerned, we have first dibs on Frank." The 3 of us joined Hannah at the table, and I made the introductions. The rest of the evening was spent dancing with all 3 of them. When I danced with Brenda, she naturally asked about the situation with Doris. "The odds are pretty high that Doris and I will be back together by Monday when you see her at work. It's not a certainty, but it's close. I could be wrong, though. I gave her an ultimatum. If she accepts it, we'll work things out. If not, we won't." "You do realize there will be a few unhappy women if you and Doris reconcile, right?" Brenda said. "I hadn't thought it would be a big deal." "Oh, but it will be. Marcia likes Doris, but is secretly hoping you two don't get back together, giving her a chance with you. The young lady you just introduced is clearly interested, and then there's me. Doris is a good friend, so I'd never try to take you from her. But if things don't work out, I'd definitely be interested. Well, just between us, if Doris and I do break up and Marcia, Hannah, and you are still available, you'd be the front runner." She smiled, kissed me, and we returned to the table when the song ended. A little while later, I decided to call it a night and headed back to the motel. I slept in the next morning, and when I finally got up, I headed to the IHOP for breakfast. Back at the hotel, I considered starting to pack, but decided to hold off and not assume anything. Around noon, I called Doris. "Hello? It's me. When are you coming home? What did you decide?" "Damn it, Frank. You know exactly what I decided. It will never happen again, I swear. Please come home." Look for me around 5. I still have some packing to do. I'll have dinner ready. As I packed, I wondered if she could truly change. Women often use sex to manipulate, but I meant what I'd said. I suppose only time would tell.